Toby nodded. Do you remember anything from the crash, Toby? Toby looked away from her. His mind went blank for a moment. He looked down at his lap, and in the surrounding area, he heard a faint, ringing sound. His eyes widened, and he froze in place. Toby? The counselor asked. Toby, are you listening? Toby felt a shiver go down his spine until he froze once again and slowly looked over out the little window to the door where he saw it. A dark, featureless figure peering in at him. He stared. His eyes widened, the ringing growing louder and louder until suddenly the loud voice of the counselor broke his trance. Toby! She yelled. Toby jumped and fell sideways out of his chair and backed up into the corner. Dr. Oliver stood up, holding a clipboard to her chest, a surprised look in her eyes. Toby met her eyes again, his breath hitching as he twitched. That night, Toby lay in bed. His eyes were gazed as he stared straight up at the ceiling. He could feel himself begin to doze off when he heard the scattering of footsteps down his hallway. He got up and looked towards his doorway wide open. There was no light. Everything was lit by the luminescent blue glow of the moon through his window. Having a cold lightening, he stood up and slowly made his way towards the doorway, when suddenly the door, which was previously was wide open, slammed in his face. He gasped and fell back. He was out of breath when he hit the ground, and he began breathing heavily. His eyes wide open, he waited for a few seconds before going back on his feet. He reached out and grasped the cold door handle with his bandaged hand, and it creaked open. He looked out into the dark hallway and tiptoed out of his room. The window at the end of the hallway lit up the darkness with blue moonlight. As he padded his way down, he could hear footsteps rustling around him and faint giggling, followed by the pitter-patter of small feet, which sounded like a child had ran in front of him, giggling and running around. The hallway was a lot longer than he remembered. It seemed endless, like the ride home from the hospital. He heard a door creak in front of him. "Mom?" he called out in a shaky voice. Suddenly a door slammed behind him, and he jumped and turned around behind him. He heard a long, eerie groan that sounded like a croak right in his ear. He turned around and as fast as he could, and was suddenly face to face with none other than his dead sister. Her eyes were clouded white, her skin pale, the right side of her jaw dangling there by tissue and muscle, glass protruding from her forehead, black blood leaking down her face, her blonde hair pulled up in a ponytail, as it always was, and she was wearing a gray t-shirt and athletic shorts which were dirty and spotted with blood. Her legs were bent in ways they shouldn't be. She stood imitating a long, croaking noise, only an inch away from Toby's face. Toby yelped and followed back. "Ah!" He started to crawl backwards away from her, but he was unable to break the eye contact he had with her blank, dead eyes. He dragged himself backwards until he backed up into something. He stopped for a second. Everything was dead silent except for his heavy breathing. And crying. He slowly looked up to meet the blank face of a tall, dark figure, the same figure that stood over him. Now behind the tall, dark mass were rows of children, looking to range from 3 to 10 years old, their eyes completely black, and dark black blood leaked from eye sockets. He screamed, "Ah!" and stood up as fast as he could, only to be tripped by dark black tendrils that wrapped around his ankle. He fell straight on his stomach and got the wind knocked out of him. He tried to scream, but he couldn't make a sound. He wheezed out before it all went